Ladies and gentlemen, to begin our program, please welcome to the stage NAWB Vice Chair Andrew Bursig.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all have enjoyed the forum so far. I know yesterday had a number of great panels. We had great speakers, very interesting topics to be sure, and today will be no different. So today, really, we're going to start off by talking about connectivity, connections between each other, connections in a digital world, and making the most of human data capital. No one knows this better than our keynote speaker, Alan Blue, co-founder of the world's largest professional social network, LinkedIn. As Vice President of Product Development, he's the mind behind the means that drives LinkedIn's overall product strategy. Now, I think yesterday I asked you to take at least one thing that you learn and in the moment to share that. And hopefully you, like I, are using your LinkedIn apps to do that. I know Alan would appreciate it. And I'm ad-libbing here, so this is not on the script. But with the profile data of 146 million US workers, 20,000 businesses, and over 50,000 skills that can be showcased on the LinkedIn platform, Alan Blue will bring his considerable experience and formidable perspective to guide us in forging change in our own regional labor markets. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our keynote speaker, Alan Blue.
Okay, good morning. You can all hear me okay? Got it? All right, that's great. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to be here. There are a lot of people who LinkedIn has worked with over the years here in the room, and a bunch more who I'm looking forward to working with, starting today. And as we move forward, LinkedIn is, as you know, a platform for making things happen in the economy. And it's just a platform. And the partnership and the support that you all show as you help forge relationships between workers and educators and job seekers makes all the difference. You're the people who make the platform go, so thank you very much. I wanted to talk a little bit about my own background and kind of how I got where I am on some of the issues around the future of work. So when we started LinkedIn, this is back in 2003, we really started it for ourselves. So we were internet entrepreneurs, and our whole notion of what LinkedIn was and what it was good for was based solely on our own experience up to that point. So we were technology people, even though my background isn't strictly technology, and we had done a couple of startups together. And we looked around and we said, hey, the key thing of making all this work, every startup out there, the key bit is actually that there are people behind us helping us. We have a network who's actually making us successful. Because the biggest observation in the world of small business, and I'm sure there are many people who have either run small businesses or worked in small businesses over time here in the audience, the biggest observation is that when you're working for a small business, most of your resources are outside your company and not inside your company. So if you've got a question to ask or you need help getting something done, you can't walk down the hall to the person 5 doors down and ask them what to do, because there probably isn't a hall, and there probably isn't somebody 5 doors down. Instead, you've got to go outside and find somebody who can actually help. So we decided to build LinkedIn so that basically everybody could take advantage of the network the way we had been able to take advantage of it when building the startups that we did. Now, as we grew, as we became a bigger and bigger company, we basically got to the point where people began to think differently than us about what the platform actually was. So in the early days, we really had technology entrepreneurs in mind, but the group of people who were on LinkedIn kept getting more and more diverse. People from different industries we didn't know anything about, people from outside the United States, people in businesses that we didn't understand. So as we went, we began learning about what was actually necessary. When we got to about 2012, we began noticing there were a bunch of people on the platform who basically we didn't know how to help at all. And that group of people were people who were not white-collar workers. They were people who had, and again, I don't have great terminology for this, but they had middle-skill jobs or low-skill jobs. Those aren't even the right things. They're like, it's more like highly trained or highly skilled, but non-white-collar workers. Basically, people from all across the economy. And it was clear to us at that point that we were going to need to do something different for that group of people than we had done for our white-collar colleagues up to that point. White-collar professionals have lots of examples all around them of how to use their networks, how to create a resume, or in our case, a profile. That was less true of the audience who was beginning to come onto LinkedIn. So we started thinking about the things that mattered to them, and one of the first things that popped up was jobs. And I'm like, well, what are we going to do in the world of jobs for this group? Because we knew at that time that things were actually changing. And in 2012, sort of began our first step towards thinking about what changes were coming up and what we were going to have to do about them. So you all know, that's me, you all know that there's a lot of things that are changing in the world of work right now. We can see some of these things at LinkedIn, but we can't see all of them yet because we don't have perfect visibility, especially into many of the jobs that are being affected. But something is clearly up. We know that over the last few years, and I'll show you a slide in a couple minutes here, about the types of jobs that are actually emerging. As those jobs emerge, what we see is we see other jobs beginning to get deprioritized. So on the left here, we see it's an infographic from McKinsey and Company, part of a report they were doing about the changes that are occurring. There's a set of things which are particularly susceptible to the kind of technological changes which are occurring right now. There's an excellent book, if you hadn't read it, talking about this subject, written by a couple of MIT economists. It's called The Second Machine Age. And they call it the second machine age because once upon a time, machines came in and replaced our muscles. And now, in the second machine age, machines are coming in to replace our brains. And at that point, we're going to see some major changes in the way that work actually happens. As a matter of fact, I was, just 3 weeks ago, I was at a summit, an internal summit at LinkedIn, and the audience I was talking to was all of our financial professionals, so the CFO's organization. And it was really interesting. That CFO organization had the same set of worries about automation and their own jobs that a lot of workers who are concerned about their jobs at the plant, their jobs doing service work, are having right now. There were people in the audience who were worried. These are financial professionals, accountants, and more. And they were worried that their jobs were going to be automated out of existence. And they were curious where they were going to go within LinkedIn, you know, this big Silicon Valley company, where they were going to go within LinkedIn once their jobs were actually replaced by expert systems and machines. So those kinds of changes are actually occurring all over the place, and not just among people who are doing physical work or work in what are more traditional middle skill kinds of areas. If you look at the chart on the right, this is actually from a really great Bain report, which came out, I think, 2 months ago. And it's talking about the potential volume of change that we're actually going to see. I don't know if you can quite read it, but basically the idea is that in 1900 to 1940, basically there was disruption to 1.2 million jobs a year. In 1970 to 1990, in the world of manufacturing, again, this was just under 1 million jobs a year. But looking for 2020 and beyond, that number could be as much as 2.5 million jobs a year in the US being disrupted by this change. That's a lot of change to put up within a very, very short period of time. So, lots of uncertainty in terms of what's actually coming. Something's coming, maybe not that big, but lots of uncertainty. So now the question is, what do we do because it's being compounded simultaneously with another big change, which is the movement from full-time employment to contract work? So you can see over there on the left that in the United States, there's a real swing towards people taking freelance jobs. And freelance jobs are very broadly defined. This is actually based on our own data. We have a program internally called, or a product called ProFinder. And ProFinder allows service industry professionals to find people who essentially to sell their services and for people to find those service industries. So that's people who are providing services to professionals like logo design and legal help and so forth. It's allowed us to view information about how people are moving from the world of full-time employment into the world of freelance employment. And you can see there's already some major shift there. And on the right-hand side is the general change to the percentage of Americans who are doing temporary work. And it's actually pretty significant. So now we've got two things that are competing for competing to change our environment around work. So the first one is the rise of automation. Second one is the rise of temporary work. So pretty major changes. This is some information about some of the jobs that are actually emerging and how this combined set of things becomes a real problem for employers. So again, difficult to see. We took the top 5 and put them over there. But you can see the types of jobs that are actually emerging, the ones that are experiencing really massive growth. They're almost all tech jobs or tech skill-based jobs. And they are, you can see the ones at the very top, which are growing, and I don't know if I can't see the number, but basically it's a 10x change in the period from 2012 to 2017. That's in data science and machine learning. And that's a major new area of growth. So what we've got is this weird conflation of brand new tech skills emerging, automation changing the foundations of the work that people are doing in the middle skill area, and then this change towards 1099 or temporary or freelance work. That's a lot of stuff to be happening simultaneously, and something that LinkedIn and we together need to think about how we can possibly solve. So we have, over the years, built up a resource at LinkedIn, which we call the economic graph. And I'm sure some of you have heard of this concept, but I want to talk a little bit about what it is and how it can be valuable in addressing some of these issues. So the economic graph began simply as the LinkedIn network. Back in the day, as I said, we got professionals connected to each other, building up a network, but it turned out in the process of actually doing that, people would say, here's the school I went to, or here's the job I have, or here's the the company I work for. And as they did so, they pulled all this information about companies and schools and skills and jobs. They pulled it all into LinkedIn and connected it all together. So if you look at my profile on LinkedIn, what you're going to see is that I, Alan, am connected to a bunch of people, but I'm also connected to Stanford University, where I went to school. I'm also connected to a bunch of jobs I've had over the years, and through that, to a bunch of companies that I have worked for during that time. So when you put all that information together, you can actually get a lot of value if you're inside the network, searching for people and trying to take advantage of your network. But if you step back from it and try to understand the work of the whole economy, you can begin to understand some pretty interesting stuff. So that is what we call the economic graph, this stepping back to look at the entire LinkedIn network, but to look at it from the outside. So let me give you an idea of what we actually can do with it. You can see how many people are actually in it right now, so it's really quite large. So on the left-hand side, we can begin to get information, for instance, about skill and talent migration. So what you see, and I know it's a little bit difficult to read, the good thing is you can go to blog.linkedin.com and you can actually pull these up and examine it for cities all across the United States. What you see in the center is Chicago, Illinois, and these green circles show you where the talent is flowing into Chicago. So these are people who are updating their LinkedIn profiles and saying, I used to live in Champaign-Urbana, which is the biggest source of talent migration into Chicago. And now I've updated my LinkedIn profile, and now I'm working for a company which is based in the city. So that's a pretty powerful thing when viewed at this level. And you can see all the other sources of migration and the intensity of that migration over time. One of the things that's most amazing about the economic graph is that it is actually kept up to date on a regular basis. So there's a real challenge with traditional labor market data, which is to say it's done via survey. It basically has a lag time in terms of how long it actually takes to get. LinkedIn is in a different position because people are updating their profiles on a regular basis at LinkedIn, and companies are updating information about themselves. New jobs are being posted all the time, and all that information is automatically and immediately made part of that economic graph. So it's actually a very powerful tool for looking at what's happening right now in the economy. On the right-hand side, this is for Phoenix, Arizona, and you can see these are skill clusters. So you can see that accounting and banking, administrative office assistant, these are the things which are most scarce in Phoenix. So if you are actually able, for instance, to bring together information about skills scarcity, and that which is to say there are people out there who don't have these skills. Second, about the jobs that are actually available in a single location and the companies who are hiring. And then third, about the training programs that are actually helping people acquire those skills. You can begin to tell a picture, tell a story about basically how skill gaps are forming in the system. Because a skill gap is obviously when there's strong employer demand, but not as much resource supply for that demand in the marketplace. We were able to do a similar analysis to this for Denver, Colorado. We were able to tie together 3 really interesting pieces of data. We were able to say that the most scarce skill, where there was the highest demand, was for medical coders. So you all probably know what a medical coder is. If you don't, it's somebody who basically codes diagnoses and so forth for use in insurance and for hospital record keeping. So it's not a technical job, it's a hospital administrative job. That was the biggest need, and we were able to also identify right nearby the schools which were training people to be medical coders. That's actually, we believe, a powerful way of looking at this data so that you can say, hey, if we actually know that, then maybe we could put the educator and the employer together to have them have a conversation about how they can build a stronger pipeline of candidates for that particular skill. If we're able to do that, then maybe we can stay ahead on some of this skill gap stuff. That, I believe, is, from LinkedIn's perspective, the most valuable thing that we can provide. I talked about automation, about how kind of a strange and unpredictable thing it actually is, the movement towards the 1099 economy or freelance economy, unclear how that's going to happen, and we have no idea what skills are actually going to emerge in the next few years. Predicting the future is a super hard thing. However, if we can build a system which is immediately responsive to the changes that are actually occurring in the marketplace with this live data which people are providing on LinkedIn on a regular basis, maybe we can build a system which reacts very quickly to changes which actually occur in the marketplace, which I hope would be as far as we can go to making sure that the system that we have of education to train people, support, the kind of support that you all provide in terms of helping people make the migration through training into jobs, and the demand signals coming from employers, hopefully we can build something which is highly responsive. So at the very least, we don't fall behind, and we do our best to stay up to date on what's actually happening. The closest example we've got of this right now, and of this working at scale, LinkedIn did a project with New York City not that long ago. Bill de Blasio, who's the mayor there, reached out to us and said, hey, you know, we're going to spend $10 million here in New York on how we get more tech talent into New York, but we don't really know what we're talking about. Can you help us out? So basically, we brought a bunch of data with us. We actually took a data scientist and embedded it with the mayor's team for a little while. And we were able to show the flows through New York City of tech talent, where people were getting trained, which people left the city rather than staying in the city, what people were coming to the city from, where they were coming from, where they were getting their training outside the city. And the mayor's office was able to create a program by pulling together employers. They had the convening power to pull together some employers and also to bring together schools in the New York City area and basically finance changes to their curriculum so that their curriculum would be better aligned with what the needs actually look like in the marketplace. So that's actually a pretty good example, taking advantage of a mayor's desire to make that difference and their convening power built on top of the data to make a difference. So it's actually a pretty powerful system if we can actually get it deployed everywhere in the United States. And that is actually one of the big challenges that we have. If you want to find out more about the economic graph, by the way, that's the website you should go check out. This idea that basically there was a way of tying educators and employers and individuals together into the same system, at least in my own head, came from a conversation that I had. This is back in 2012, as I said. So I was sitting on a panel. It was a 2012 presidential campaign. And so I got invited to be on a panel. I forget exactly where it was. It was somewhere out here on the East Coast. And we were talking about the future of work and things that were actually going to happen there. And there was a guy who was on the panel with me. And he ran a community college here on the East Coast. And he basically told me that he had solved the skills gap problem in his area. And so I was like, all right, I've been thinking about this. How would you do it? And his answer was, well, I had my students graduating from our college, and they would go out in the field and they wouldn't get jobs. And I was sick of it. I was sick of like having such terrible results for the people who were actually out there. And so what he did is he went out and talked to the local employers. So he said, I'm going to go out and meet with everybody in the area, and I'm going to find out what's actually necessary. And he developed 6 training programs. Those 6 training programs then had placement rates in the range of 80 to 90% of the graduates actually went on and found work in the area, which is like super high. And he was able to tell me that he had closed the skills gap. I was like, wow, that was a really amazing story. And every time I looked around, whenever you were able to put an educator and an employer together, there were almost always good results. And we have seen this wherever we've gone when we've talked to people about this area. So the biggest question was, we got this economic graph thing. Could we actually build that at LinkedIn? And basically make that work anywhere. So what I wanted to do was share a little bit of the kind of how we got there, because I know you all are thinking about a similar set of problems when it comes to running your own organizations, on the ground, helping people move into the world of work. I'm sharing this stuff not because I think that the stuff that LinkedIn learned is necessarily the very best stuff for the kinds of problems that you're facing. But I do want to share our thought process for how we got there and how we think about building products. This is true of Silicon Valley in general, but also this project specifically. I want to talk about it because I think, I hope it will be valuable or at least thought-provoking. So every 6 weeks, I stand up in front of a group of new product managers at LinkedIn. So these are new people who are going to come in, they're going to run parts of our product organization, and they're going to be responsible for strategy and building products and so forth. Product management in technology world is a little bit like being a CEO of your area. So basically, you're kind of the leader who pulls the group of people together, engineers, designers, and so forth, to build one of the products that people use on a regular basis. And one of the first things I tell them is this foundational idea behind LinkedIn and how we think about how we actually provide value to people. So it is a tendency to somebody who actually works on a product to say, hey, I'm providing the value and the user's going to come to me to get the value. So the product I have is actually the thing people care about. It turns out that is not true at all. People simply don't really care about the products about their products. If you have one of these devices, We all value this device not because we value the device all by itself. We value it because it lets us talk to other people, either by phone or by text or by email or whatever. It allows us to use Facebook and Instagram to take photographs. It's what I do with the device and the value that comes from it that matters, not the device itself. This is why I always have to say this to product managers when they come in, because it's easy for product managers to lose track of the fact that the value is actually being provided from person to person within LinkedIn. So if you talk to Mark Zuckerberg, who's in the news a lot these days, so everybody knows who Mark Zuckerberg is, one of the things he's fond of saying at Facebook is that nobody cares about Facebook, they only care about their friends. And that same thing is true for people who use LinkedIn. Nobody cares about LinkedIn, they only care about, can I get a job? Can I hire people? Can I find an answer to a question that I actually care about? Can I stay in touch with somebody? Can I sell my product? Can I build my business? Those are the reasons people actually use our products. This thing is an extremely important force when we think about the products that we're actually building. So if you're actually building a product, what you want to be looking for is, what do my users really need or want to have? Because what that does is it provides an engine to make the entire system work. So at LinkedIn, there are 3 things people care about, and only 3 things. They care about getting a job, they care about getting an answer or making a decision, and they care about doing their work, actually going home early after I've done my work. That's it. Everything else that happens on LinkedIn is additional or lower value to people. Like, for instance, we've got this brand new product. I don't want to paint it in too bad a picture, but I think it makes it really easy to understand what I'm talking about. We have a product called Lynda, right? Or it's now called LinkedIn Learning. People were familiar with Lynda back in the day. So Lynda was an online training platform, video training, super high quality stuff. One of the hardest things to think about is that the number of people who actually care about learning for learning's sake, in other words, I love to learn, is very, very small. The number of people who want to learn in order to get a job is very large, relatively speaking, right? That difference matters a lot, because it means if you can identify what most of your customers care about, you can use that motivation of theirs as an engine to drive your system forward. It's important, I think, as I was looking through, and again, anything I might say here about how you all operate what you're doing, please take it with a grain of salt. It doesn't come from a position of great experience, but as I was reading through the WIOA stuff, I was like, there are some pieces in here which might actually take advantage of this, and this is one of those places. Who are your customers and what do they want? So my big question is, like, for an employer, what does an employer really care about? At LinkedIn, we know what that employer cares about. The thing which actually gets them to use our product all day, to pay us a bunch of money to use our product, is they want to hire great talent. That's what they care about. All the other stuff that we can provide is fine. But if I'm not actually bringing talented people into my organization, it doesn't matter. So we need to be able to supply that, and that actually is the engine which drives LinkedIn's whole business. So that's first thing. If you can figure out what people actually care about, they will drive you forward successfully. Second thing is, value is exchanged between people. It's not something which is basically, I do something and it's unrelated to what somebody else is doing. In our world, in the world where we're trying to get people hired, what we're really talking about is we're talking about a marketplace. So the key piece for making the system work is making sure you match the supply and the demand. So what does that mean at LinkedIn? LinkedIn, over the years, we have been focused on white-collar work, as you all know. And as I said, we're moving into more, we have a broader and broader population who are outside the world of white-collar work. But if we had people who were only hiring engineers and we only had accountants on the platform, that wouldn't work. That would be a failure, a marketplace failure. And neither side would be able to achieve what it actually wanted to achieve. So a big part of what we do is we try to build matching between the two systems. So we have put billions of dollars, I'm probably not even exaggerating, into how do we allow person A who has this need to find the other person in the system who can help solve that need. For us, that's a big technological problem. For you guys, in your specific location, that could be a technological problem, and we would love to figure out a way to help with that, and hopefully LinkedIn itself is helping already. But it might be a person problem, which is to say, if you have an employer over here who needs to hire this group of people, and you know a source of people over here, and you can make that match just with your own brain and knowledge of the local environment, that is hugely valuable to both ends of that spectrum. So if you can identify the value, and you can build out a notion of the marketplace so that the two sides are satisfying each other, you can go a long way towards solving the problems of the people who are using the system. Third thing is, how do you basically help that communication work? I mentioned we spent a bunch of time and money working on matching people. But frankly, most companies don't know how to hire. Most individuals don't know how to search for jobs. It's just the case. So a big part of what LinkedIn does is we try to make it easier for individuals to successfully look and for companies to successfully hire. So when a really big company comes to LinkedIn and they say, we want to hire a bunch of people, I can guarantee you they know what they're looking for. And they know who they actually want to hire. They've got a process for doing it. But when you're talking about a smaller company, like a little company, maybe a couple hundred people or whatever, the chances they even have a full-time HR person are really, really small. And if they have that person still has very limited resources to get their job done. So a big part of what we try to do is we try to fill that gap. We try to put a service in place which allows them to make choices without them having to have a whole team of recruiters to solve their problem. So a few months ago, we started experimenting with essentially automatic matching systems so that a small business could come in and they could say, I want to hire somebody who looks like that. And then we'll show you more people who look like that in your area as a way of helping you solve your problem. That's a nice, easy way to get to the place where essentially, hey, it's kind of like having another recruiter in the room who can say, well, how about this person? How about this person? How about this person? So the big question for me for LinkedIn is, if you can understand people's motivations and you can match the supply and demand, then how do you make sure that both sides can actually take advantage of it? Especially because they're at such different levels. And frequently for us, this means bringing in other resources. So yes, we build products, but also we need to be able to bring in people and third-party services. Basically people who are going to come in and help. Over the years, we've met a bunch of people who are interested in plugging into our platform to fill a gap for us. So a good example is education. We have LinkedIn Learning, we have Lynda, but there's a lot of types of education out there that we're just not prepared to do. So when it comes to training somebody how to do leadership or how to use a high-tech piece of software, we have material to actually do that. But when it comes to training somebody how to do welding or how to do sort of front-of-house restaurant management, those are places where we simply don't have the materials to actually make it happen. So at that point, we need to call upon other people who are in the educational area and try to tie them into the process so that we can make sure that every individual who needs help can find that help, even if LinkedIn is not providing it. So, value, marketplace, helping people solve their problems, bringing in third-party services in order to do it, and the final thing is a notion of rivers, which is a big concept within Silicon Valley. There's a guy who worked at LinkedIn. He was one of the heads of product management, and he gave a speech on his last day out. His name was Elliot Schmuckler, and he talked about rivers. Rivers in the Silicon Valley sense means where is the flow of user activity and how do you become part of it? So one of the things which is most challenging for any internet company is how do you go from, here's a company nobody's ever heard, to I'm in a place where people are seeing me all the time. And traditionally, the way that's worked in the internet is people have done what's called search engine optimization, which is to say they've made it so they show up in search results when people go to Google, right? So whenever somebody's trying to solve a problem, they're going to go to Google, and you want to be found when they go to Google. So the same is true for LinkedIn. We have a feed on our, as you all know, we have a feed. And product managers want their products to show up in that feed. Similarly, Facebook has a feed. You want people to be sharing stuff on Facebook. So one of the biggest challenges about making any internet product, and LinkedIn included, work is how do you get in front of all the people who are making decisions? And how do you get in front of a job seeker when they're trying to find a new job? So those big things are the 5 areas that basically I wanted to sort of talk about from our perspective and sort of some of the ways we've solved them. And I hope that these are things which are going to be valuable to you as you think about some of the stuff that you're actually dealing with on a regular basis. If I was to sit down with any of you and talk to you, I believe this to be true, and talk to you about what kind of problems are you facing right now in terms of serving this population better, whether it be the population of employers, educators, or job seekers, I would be asking questions about these 5 things. Because if you can get these bits right, I think you can go a tremendous distance towards actually being part of the decision making, solving users' problems, making connections between people. And I think that's the energy which actually propels solutions like the ones we're all talking about forward. All right, I want to make one more point before I wrap up. And it's about networks. So I mentioned the word network several times during this conversation. One of the things that I do at LinkedIn is I meet companies when they come in to talk to LinkedIn about, and not just about the products and services that we sell, but they come to Silicon Valley frequently trying to answer a question about how can we be more innovative? How can we do something which is different than our competitors? How do we make sure we stay ahead in the system, ahead of our competitors, ahead of the market, and so forth? And one of the things that I always tell them is that a key piece of understanding about how Silicon Valley works is that in Silicon Valley, people are exchanging information with each other all the time, okay? So LinkedIn is my 3rd startup. So the first startup, I met a bunch of people. The second startup, I worked with some of them again. The third startup, I worked with some of them again. But some of the people who I worked with went off and started other companies or went off and did other things. We recombine a lot. We meet each other. We have experiences here. We bring them to different companies. Silicon Valley has a lot of change and flow through of people bringing new ideas together. What's more, we talk to each other on a regular basis. So I talk to people at Facebook all the time. And they learn things from LinkedIn. I talk to people at education companies all the time. I talk to people internationally a lot to learn what they know and to share what I know, because that kind of cross-pollination of ideas matters more than almost anything else for driving innovation in Silicon Valley. I also think that networks are the perfect way for you all to think about yourselves as these primary matchmakers. I know that I spend about 2/3 of my time interacting with my own network, introducing people to each other. So it's not that I get anything out of it or whatever. It's just like, hey, here's an interesting person here, and they're going to work over here. I would like these 2 people to know each other, because then they can do work together. Networks are the fundamental component of both innovation and, in a lot of cases, the ability to actually deliver your services. And that is certainly true for us at LinkedIn. And my guess is that anytime you're dealing with a diverse collection of people in a single location, the network matters almost more than anything else. So if there's any thought to sort of leave behind, it's how do you build up a network which is diverse enough so that you're making matches within that network several times a week to bring people together? Because if you can actually do that, the amount of value that you bring to both sides is gigantic. And given the business that we all work in, your ability to actually deliver for your customers goes up a huge amount. Because as I said, if you can get together the right employer and the right educator together at the right time, because you know they're both out there and they're not aware of each other, you're doing a huge service to both sides and the job seekers who will be taking advantage of their services. So with that, I will leave it. We're going to turn over to, in a minute here, to a conversation with a bunch of employers led by my colleague, Nicole. And certainly, I will be around for a little bit. I would love to chat with folks afterwards if you have questions or follow-ups on any of this. Thanks. Do this? Yeah.
Good morning. Hope we're doing okay. I guess maybe I will never grow up. I'm assuming people around me every day know that I won't. But as a Pittsburgh kid, the first time I met Fred Rogers, who was a remarkable, wonderful, warm, gentle human being, the first time I met Fred Rogers, he was like,
Tom Hanks is going to play him in a movie.
LinkedIn.
Really?
Alan Blue. That's LinkedIn. That would be perfect. Yes, crazy. Live. I love this.
Yeah, I can't think of.
I want to start off, and I want to thank some of our industry partners, because you're going to see some of them on the panel, and you're going to see them the rest of the day. So I want to give a shout out to the Associated Builders and Contractors, the National Coalition of Certification Centers, the National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation, the National Retail Federation Foundation, and our newest industry partner, the American Hotel and Lodging Association. We're really excited to enter into these partnerships. We know that there are thousands and thousands of businesses out there. We hope that in your local area, when you start to think about what businesses do we want to work with, please look for the businesses who belong to their national association, because it says something about how they value workforce development and the people that work for them. It's my pleasure now to introduce the moderator for this panel, Nicole Isaac, and she is the head of U.S. Public Policy for LinkedIn here in Washington, D.C. She is responsible for LinkedIn's day-to-day policy and government affairs portfolio, taking primary responsibility for engaging with the administration, Congress, and policy-oriented NGOs on issues ranging from privacy and security to workforce development issues. She conducts economic graph outreach and engagement to educate the U.S. government and other policy stakeholders on our economic graph work, and ensures alignment and coordination with LinkedIn's parent company, Microsoft. Please give a warm welcome to Nicole Isaac.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here, and I'm super excited to introduce our illustrious panelists. I hope you're having a great morning. I know that Alan provided tremendous background and information about all the ways in which data and the power of analytics can really transform our workforce. And so we look forward to diving into that a bit more with this tremendous group of individuals who collectively are representing over $1 trillion in revenue, as well as 1 million+ individuals with respect to their employer network, as well as the individuals who are operating on the ground. So with that, I'll introduce each of the panelists in turn, and please welcome them. Thank you. First, we have Michael Bellerman. Michael is President and CEO of the Associated Building and Contractors. Michael is a business leader in real estate and construction, and experience in startup ventures, business growth and development, as well as acquisitions, integration, and organizational change. He has in-depth industry experience in insourcing, outsourcing, and strategic supply chain engineering. Second, we have Ms. Ellen Davis. Ellen is the president of the National Retail Federation Foundation, as well as the Senior Vice President of Research and Strategic Initiatives at the National Research Federation. Ellen oversees a team charged with shaping retail's future through awareness building, training, education, and scholarship programs. She's an expert in the retail industry's strategic communications, research, talent acquisition, development, and organizational change management. We also have Mr. Bill Hanvey, who is the president and CEO of the Auto Care Association. Bill has over 25 years of experience in the auto care industry, and most recently as SVP of Programs and Member Services of the Automotive Aftermarket Suppliers Association. Prior to joining the Auto Care Aftermarket Suppliers Association, he was Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the Schlaffer Group, a multi-billion-dollar Tier 1 automotive parts manufacturer in Germany. Next, we have Todd Thibodeau. Todd is the CEO of CompTIA and heads the leading nonprofit trade association for the global tech industry. Todd collectively represents over 600,000 open jobs right now, and CompTIA represents more than 10,000 member companies and 3,000 business partners spanning the worldwide tech industry. He is responsible for advancing industry growth through education and training programs, market intelligence, research, networking events, professional certifications, and public advocacy. We also have Mark Carrier. Mark is the chair of the American Hotel and Lodging Association. I said to Mark backstage that I was tremendously impressed that his association is single-handedly responsible for over $500 billion in revenue in the US alone. He heads an organization that's vital to the hospitality industry, US workers, and the overall economy. It has a huge reach across the country, supporting over 8 million jobs and a broad range of stakeholders. And last but not least, we have Rob Gifford. Rob is the Executive Vice President of Philanthropic Initiatives, and he leads a comprehensive fundraising program for the National Restaurant Association for their Education Foundation. Prior to his term as the Executive VP, he was President and CEO of the Michigan Restaurant Association, where he grew revenues by over 500% and doubled the membership. Before that, Rob was with the National Restaurant Association as a lobbyist with over 25 years of industry experience and driving their initiatives across the country at the federal, local, and state levels. Please join me in welcoming our illustrious panelists. Thank you. Great. So now that I've provided some background and introductions for each of you, I think it would be helpful if we can talk through the scope of the industry, who do you represent, as well as your organizational structure. So for instance, I know that the hotel and lobbying industry represents a bit different structure than, for instance, the Restaurant Association. If we can unpack that a bit, I'd love to provide that information for each of our attendees. Michael?
Sure. Associated Builders and Contractors has 70 chapters across the United States of America. We got over 21,000 company members that are members of those chapters. We have a number of training relationships. We do training at our chapters. We help facilitate training with our members. We have partnerships with K-12 schools as well as community colleges and universities across the country. So we're very, very engaged with the workforce boards and very happy to be here.
Terrific. Thank you. Ellen?
So you build things, we sell things. I'm Ellen Davis with the National Retail Federation. I run our foundation, which is focused on shaping retail's future. We look at talent through all ages and ranges of the spectrum, from entry-level jobs to college students to people in the industry and looking for ways to help them grow. We represent over 10,000 retailers around the country, some of the largest, including Walmart and Amazon, and many, many small retailers as well. Our industry right now has a number of openings, which we'll talk about later, and so really the focus on workforce and talent is crucial, not only for the nation's economy and workforce, but also for the health of our industry. So thanks for being here.
Excellent. Thank you. Bill?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bill Hanvey. I'm the president and CEO of the Auto Care Association. You build, you sell, we keep you moving.
All right.
So if you own a vehicle, we represent the entire independent supply chain for repair. So all the way from the manufacturers of parts to the distributors of parts, such as Napa, O'Reilly, AutoZone, all the way down to the shop on the corner of Elm and Main. We provide 4.6 million jobs to the economy. We're $581 billion strong, and we are an industry undergoing a tremendous amount of change, which is why we're here today.
Terrific. Thank you. Todd?
I'm Todd Thibodeau, President and CEO of CompTIA. CompTIA represents the global tech industry, and if you look at the scale and scope of tech nationwide and all around the world, we're talking about trillions of dollars of business here. In the US alone, the tech industry is about $1 trillion based on the last estimates that we've provided. 12 million employees working in tech. About half of those people work for a tech company, and about half of those people work in a tech job in a non-tech company. If you think about it, 20 years ago, if you wanted to work in tech, you had to work for a tech company. Today, if you want to work in tech, you can work anywhere. But the biggest challenge that we're facing is a pipeline shortage, and I hope that we get to that issue today, because we're not the only industry facing this. As you said, there were 600,000 open tech jobs today sitting out there, which is a huge percentage of the annual employment in the US, and not nearly enough young people coming in to the industry for a number of reasons, which I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about.
Great. Hey, the American Hotel Lodging Association represents the 50,000 hotels that are spread in every state and every congressional district across the United States. It's an association in an industry that's quite interesting, because you often think of Hilton and Marriott as the big hotel companies, but literally 65% of hotels qualify as small business. It's an industry that's quite layered, where you have brand companies like Hilton and Marriott, then you have owner and operators and management companies. It's a very interesting mix of stakeholders. I actually serve as the volunteer chair of the board, and we have folks on our executive committee like Chris Nassetta with Hilton and very senior executives, but we also represent that whole breadth of the industry. Myself, my day job is operating a hotel company where we employ about 1,600 people directly in the operation of 21 hotels that we operate under franchise arrangements with Hilton, Marriott, Intercontinental, and leading hotels of the world.
I'm Rob Gifford. The National Restaurant Association represents an industry with 15 million employees, 1 million establishments around the country. The Educational Foundation works to attract, to empower, and to advance our nation's workforce via the fabric of restaurants. We have a critical role as first employer to play, I think, in forming the future workforce of this nation. There are 6.5 million openings on an annual basis in the restaurant industry, which we have a desperate need to fill so that we can better train and advance our youth around this country and develop them for careers both in our industry and in others. We look forward to the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you all. So we talked a bit about the scope and size of these respective industries, and all of the individuals who are serviced by these associations. Can we talk a bit about the jobs, what they look like? I think the perception is that we're only talking about frontline and middle skill workers, that we're only talking about retail workers, your cashier, or your service individual who's fixing the car. Can we unpack that a bit and tell me who is it that you're typically working, or who is working within your service industry, and what were the most recent jobs in the past year?
Well, in the construction industry, we actually are having a nice construction boom right now. We have an all-time high, just over $1.2 trillion in construction spend, US dollars. And the last time we were at a peak spend was just before the Great Recession, and at that point in time, we were employing about 600,000 more than we are today. And those people are project managers, superintendents, people that are out in the field, including craft workers. These are welders, carpenters, and also in the operations in the office. Now with the advent of technology, virtual design and construction, we have building information modelers, we have life cycle cost analysis, we have a lot of types of things there. And then also a lot of the movement in terms of the construction process, because of that virtual design and construction element, has moved into prefabrication. So there's a lot of standardization. And then we are ripe for disruptive technology. So we are very eager to utilize drone technology, point cloud technology, laser scanning technology, augmented reality technology. So these are really becoming, being emerging in terms of not necessarily separate crafts, but integrated into everything we do.
Okay.
And as with the current economy, if we have a 2 or 3% construction growth over the next 2 or 3 years, and then if this infrastructure bill gets passed, it's going to be even more of a demand, because for every $1 million of infrastructure spend, that creates about 6.7 jobs. So if we get $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion over 10 years, that's another 700,000, 800,000 jobs on top of what we already have available.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. So the retail industry is responsible for about 42 million jobs in the U.S. We are the largest private sector employer in America, and as a result, that gives us a huge responsibility, much like Rob said, as a main employer for about 31% of all people in this country started off in retail. But also, you know, if you look at the depth and the scope of the companies we represent, it's really important. I think a lot of us think about retail jobs because we worked in retail jobs, and we maybe know what those jobs look like because we used to fold sweaters or work at a cash register. But right now there are between 500,000 and 600,000 open retail jobs in the U.S. I imagine most of you would be surprised to hear that over half of those jobs are not in a store. And so while stores certainly are a critical part of the retail environment, they provide tremendous first opportunities and tremendous second chances to a lot of people who are just starting out, and are a great place to grow and advance in assistant store manager or store manager. We also see tremendous growth in our industry in supply chain, in technology, in corporate jobs like in finance, marketing, et cetera. So if you look at retail, which is a very, very different than some other industries, because we've got a huge presence kind of on the ground in every city and county which you represent, but we also have tremendous talent needs at the corporate level and increasingly in logistics and supply chain because of e-commerce that are really putting pressure on a lot of companies. So as we think about how to best represent the industry and how to think about where all of this talent is coming from in the future, workforce boards for us are a hugely important piece of that equation, because there is so much of a talent need around the country for the companies that we represent.
That's great. Thanks, Bill.
Well, good morning. When people talk about the auto care industry, you automatically assume the technician, right, or the mechanic. Well, the entire supply chain, in order to make that technician successful, there's a whole ecosystem that's involved in the manufacture of the part, from manufacturing to the distribution to logistics, as we were talking about. So there's an entire supply chain that includes product managers, marketing people, pricing people, counter people that wait on you when you go into a retail location. And it all goes back and it winds up at the technician level. And at the technician level, there are more lines of code now in today's vehicle than there is in an F-16 fighter jet. So the technician that you're dealing with his role or her role has changed exponentially as vehicles have become more complex. And that's one of the major things that we're working on is bringing that workforce up to speed to meet the technological advances of today's automobile, and in turn, making sure that the infrastructure of the manufacture and distribution of that part allows you to get in and get out in a relatively short amount of time.
Todd?
All right, raise your hand if you're not a math and science genius. I'm not. All right, you're qualified to work in the tech industry. So I think that one of the biggest things impacting the tech industry now is the STEM movement in schools has done a tremendous disservice to the pipeline for tech workers. We've convinced kids that the only jobs in tech are in coding, that the only jobs in tech require math and science skills beyond what they're probably capable of in a lot of cases. And what that's done is it's decreased the pipeline of people coming into the tech industry by 15 to 20% over the last several years. anybody can work in the tech industry. So if you think about the jobs that we have, a lot of them, the majority of them are not like the jobs that Bill talked about before, where he talked about data scientists and these up-and-coming jobs. Sure, those are fast-growing jobs, but they don't represent the majority of jobs in tech. And in fact, the majority of people who work for a tech company don't even work in a tech role. They work in finance, accounting, account management, logistics, customer service, all these different parts. So there's a lot of different roles that people can play in working for a tech company. But if you think about the tech jobs that everybody knows and loves, there's customer support, there's help desk, there's network administrators, cybersecurity is very hot now. When you take those all together, they represent the majority of the jobs in tech, and these are jobs that we can train people for. Our foundation has a program that will take people from no tech skills at all, and in 8 weeks makes them job ready with professional skills, soft skills, and technical skills, and puts them in a job. Employers are willing to take these people because they come from a qualified program that they can trust. But if you don't come from that, you don't have that background, employers are not bringing you in right now. So the jobs are going to be there in the future because we have these amazing waves of new technology, and you alluded to some of them with AR, VR, IoT, smart cities, autonomous vehicles, robotics, bionics, machine learning, AI, all these different technologies that are going to come down the road, and they're going to require millions of people to build and maintain these networks. We don't know how durable any of this stuff is going to be. We're going to have people out in the field constructing this stuff and putting it together. So our needs as an industry run into the millions, and on a global basis run into almost to the tens of millions over the next 5 years. And our industry, like others, is facing a massive wave of retirements as well. So we have 12 million people. We're likely to lose half of that in the next 7 years. Wow. And we need to replace not just those 6 million people, but the growth that we need. So we're talking about needs on the order of 10 million employees over the next 8 years. And those are going to need to come from people who today don't feel they're qualified to work in this industry because they're not a math and science genius. So if there's one thing I want to tell you, it's when you have people come in and they ask you about a tech career, tell them they can do it, because they can.
Thank you, Tom.
Wow. What's fantastic about this panel is the amount of commonality that we actually have, which is perhaps something across the entire U.S. in many ways. The hotel industry is grounded in hospitality. It's that experience that hopefully you found here at this hotel with the frontline team taking care of you. And oftentimes that's the perception that a consumer has of a business. But much like my fellow panelists, there's a deep bench behind every one of the frontline personnel, whether it's in sales or marketing, e-commerce, technology, accounting, engineering, operations, culinary. We employ millions of people in the culinary trade throughout our industry. One of the more fantastic things about the hotel business in particular, and I've lived it, is one where you can really grow up from within, starting at a perhaps first stage job, gaining certification along the way, and eventually growing. I started as a dishwasher in a restaurant and caught the bug of hospitality through working in a progressive environment where the owner was always thinking about advancing people from within. And that is very much the story of the hospitality business. So as you think about engaging with the hotel industry, much like the restaurant industry, know that there is stepping stones to really lifelong careers that include certification along the way, but are part of that process of lifelong learning.
That's a great segue. And the restaurant industry, it's interesting sitting on panels like this. I know there's in audiences like this, there's always this interest in cracking the code on how to have everyone ready for the high-tech, high-skilled jobs that are out there. People have to start somewhere. And many people are not going to be successful in those jobs if they don't have the foundational, experiential learning that they need in order to be successful in the world of work. The restaurant industry has 56 different positions that exist. And many of them, yes, they're frontline positions, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are over 500,000 bartender positions we're looking to fill each year, 500,000 cook positions we're looking to fill each year, 500,000 server, waiter, waitress positions we're looking to fill each year. But we're also looking to fill over 100,000 shift supervisor positions, 100,000 manager, 100,000 general manager. And like lodging, the restaurant industry is an industry with a career path. And it's a career path we're proud of. It's an industry with apprenticeship. It's an industry with credentials and a way to move up. We know everyone doesn't stay, though. And so it's really important for folks to understand that there have to be industries out there societally which are giving people the foundational skills that they need in order to be successful wherever they may go. It's okay for them to work for a while in a restaurant and go through a CompTIA program and become successful in the tech industry, but they're not going to be successful in the tech industry if they don't have that foundational skills and that ability to learn. And so for the retailers on this panel and the lodging folks on this panel and the restaurateurs on this panel, I really believe that not only within our industries are there unbelievable opportunities, but that we also do an unbelievable service societally to prepare people for the world of work and their future career success.
Thank you, Rob. That's a perfect segue. That's a perfect segue into the role of the workforce investment boards and the workforce agencies. To what extent are we really seeing a gap between the skills that are needed right now, the skills that are in supply, the skills that are in demand, the ways in which these workforce agencies and job centers can legitimately train for those skills? Each of you have spoken to the millions of open jobs in your respective industry that your association is seeking to fill. Can we unpack this a bit? Can we talk about what are the ways in which we can work more collectively with each of the people in this room, each of the individuals who are serving the population that we're most seeking to address? And to Rob's point, how can we bring in those foundational skills in a manner that is most reflective in these jobs? And I see you, Ellen, nodding. But Michael, do you?
Yeah, sure. I think in our situation, what we're seeing in apprenticeship training, apprenticeship in general definition is earn while you learn. A more traditional apprenticeship training is time-based training. The industry is really moving more towards a competency-based training, stackable credentials that are portable, that are geared directly towards the value proposition of that client, of their employer, to their clients on the projects that they're building. So, for instance, one of our members works on getting their welders up to speed. They get their welders as X-ray certified within 18 weeks, so they're ready with that credential to deliver value to that particular project. And then as they deliver that value, they'll stack on some more credentials and some more competencies. That industry recognized competency-based training is really something that is driven by the demand, the sense of urgency, and also what it does is it realizes and recognizes transferable skills that come from other industries. So forestry industry, from the military, people that are looking for a second chance that might have learned something, as we have partnerships with correctional institutions, so that we can take that foundation, those foundational skills that are transferable, and build on those competencies so that they are adding value immediately when they get out onto the job.
Okay, perfect. Ellen?
Rob, I think your comments were spot on, so thank you for that. If they let me, I would have stood up and clapped, but I won't do that. I think something that's really a huge misperception among the service industry broadly is that these are easy jobs to get. We represent, we have a group called the Talent Acquisition Group, which is the head of talent from about 60 different retail companies in the US. I assure you that there are a lot of people who apply for retail jobs and probably restaurant and hotel jobs who are not ready to work, who don't have many of the foundational skills that are necessary for primarily customer-facing positions. And from our perspective, that's where you come in. The workforce board system is a tremendous opportunity for people to really understand and begin to learn many of the foundational skills that are important for employment. I think, in the past, it's been, well, a retail job's easy to get. I'm going to teach somebody something that requires skill. I would argue that retail jobs require a tremendous amount of skill and teach a tremendous amount of skills that you can then take to your next position, whether that's at a retailer or in another industry. Last year, about this time, we announced the creation of a program called Rise Up, which stands for Retail Industry Skills and Education. It is a training and credentialing program that will help people become trained and credentialed in the retail industry. We have 3 credentials right now. Many of you are using them: Retail Industry Fundamentals, Customer Service and Sales, and Advanced Customer Service and Sales. Last year, we put 26,000 people through that program, and we hope to double that this year. From our perspective, the workforce boards are so core to that strategy that this fall we're making a $500,000 investment and holding an event called Retail Works in New York in October for workforce board executives to come and learn more about the retail industry, how it's changing, what opportunities exist for workforce board executives to put people into retail jobs. And we're also bringing dozens of retail executives to create connections on the ground for workforce board executives to meet with employers in your area. One of the biggest challenges that we have is that we're a very decentralized industry. So unlike some other industries where you've got 10,000 people at a corporate headquarters, we exist, our companies exist in pretty much every city around the country. And so it can be really difficult for us, representing a kind of decentralized industry with many of you all over the country, 550 workforce boards around the country, to figure out how to come together so that Macy's knows how to hire through all of the workforce boards, or a Walmart, or a Target, or a Home Depot, or many of the other companies who support our work. So that's a little bit about the way that we see this world and why workforce boards are core to our strategy, because you do have the ability to impact millions of people who in many cases have barriers to entry, and we represent an industry with an opportunity for many of those people to find employment, meaningful employment that can lead to a job in our industry or somewhere else.
That's great. Thanks, Ellen. Bill?
Ellen, like yours, the auto care industry is very diverse. We have some companies that employ tens of thousands of people, and then we have a local shop on the corner of Elm and Main that employs 3 people. The challenges that we have is that the aging workforce, the average shop owner is over the age of 50. The average technician is over the age of 40. And there's a tremendous amount of turnover or change taking place at the shop level. But I do want to go back to some of the elemental things that we talked about earlier. And I identified 3 things when you talk about the core characteristics that we're looking for in a basic employee. And I'd say number 1 is problem solving. And how can how can we collectively engage the newer employees and teach them how to problem solve and to give them the confidence to be able to do that themselves. The second is basic communication. Are you able to articulate a situation or a problem effectively, either verbally or in writing, so that you gain an understanding of that? And then thirdly is organization. I think that's a key thing that's missing in a lot of the people that we see. And those are the 3 real characteristics that I look for. And it's something that, when I hire somebody, I look for those types of characteristics. And I look for the workforce boards to delve more into some of the basics in terms of the people that they bring and the skills that they're developing.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. Todd?
So when I talked about the program that we have that takes people through the 8-week training program, we work with a lot of you in the room to recruit those individuals into the cities where we have those programs. And we know the challenges that you face because we have to screen 800 people to get 25 people that we think can actually complete the program.
Wow.
So we take them through all kinds of, they have to have 10th grade reading and math, no felonies, but then they have to go through some personality profiling things. We want to find people who actually commit to the program because we provide this program for free. It costs us about $5,000 per student to take someone through the 8-week program, but the people who come through it end up making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year when most of these people never thought they'd make minimum wage. And the problems that you talked about just there are the 3 items. If you talk to any employer, those are the top 3 things. They want problem solving, they want creativity, they want communication, they want those good soft skills. But those are the hardest things for you all to train because there aren't really good coordinated programs for that. We've looked at some different programs to try to teach soft skills in a project-based environment, about a 20-hour program that we put together called Prepare You, which would help people get soft skills. So that's certainly one area, and we're going to continue to work on that for the tech sector as well. The other thing that we feel incumbent on organizations that work with you as groups is to provide you more and more tools that are specific to the industry that we're trying to represent. So we're developing a program called Tech Foundations, which is designed to give any individual a good conversational knowledge, not a technical knowledge, but a conversational knowledge of the key tech domains of the future. And that will talk about what's happening, what kind of impacts on society, what kinds of jobs and skills do you need, to really break that down. Because one of the things that's getting lost here is these jobs are all about job roles. And we work in the certification space, so we develop the job task analysis, we develop the learning objectives that come out of all these job roles. But we need to do a better job of communicating those job roles and the requirements down to individuals to give them a pathway. Because soft skills is a big part of it, technical skills is another part of it. So we hope Tech Foundations will become an entree. And I talked about getting over this confidence gap. So you hear about the skills gap a lot. I don't think there's a skills gap, because just about anybody can acquire any skills that they need to work in virtually any industry. But do they have the confidence to think that they can do it? And right now, for the tech industry in particular, we're facing this massive confidence gap that people just can't get over. We can't get those people in. 60% of the people who work in tech came from another industry. They didn't start in tech. Most people don't start in tech. In fact, the 3 biggest industries that feed the tech sector are nursing, education, and law enforcement.
Really?
People that come from other industries to work in tech. About 60% of the people who take our A+ foundational exam came from another industry, and they came from primarily 3 of those sectors. So we need to give you better tools to help you get those people over that confidence gap. Once they're over that, we need to give you better tools to point them in a direction where they can become trained, get that soft skills capability, get that technical background, and then we need to have employers step up and take these people. Because that's the biggest challenge now. Employers are being far too picky when they're not making... You know it from your clapping, they're not making the investment. They're not willing to take someone who's less than perfect. And in a market where you have 4% unemployment and 2% unemployment in the tech sector, anybody who's perfect is already working for somebody else. So the idea that you're going to get someone off the street who has everything you want when you have employers saying they want 3 to 5 years experience for an entry-level job, that's just not going to happen. So we're working hard. We actually got a piece of legislation introduced into both the House and Senate with bipartisan support called the Chance Act, which would standardize nationwide how apprenticeships could work. And we hear from more and more and more employers that if a qualified apprenticeship system was put in place that they knew how to navigate, they would use it. So we're hoping. So if you get a chance to talk to any of your representatives, talk about the Chance Act. Because if we can get this passed, we can get some standardization of apprenticeship models across the country, which will open up funding. Because right now, states are holding on to about $10 billion in job retraining funds that need to be released into the market. Because you saw this McKinsey study earlier about the impacts of automation. We could see as much as 40% of the global workforce impacted by 2030. So if you haven't read this McKinsey study, look up McKinsey Automation, and it's a great study they released last year.
We're going to get into the apprenticeship credentialing piece shortly, but let's keep it moving on the workforce agency and how can we promote efficiency and effectiveness across partners?
Well, one thing I'd certainly like to say on behalf of the AHLA is we're very proud to be joining the association as a new member, and that's a signal to you all of our desire to increase our engagement with you across the country and in states and localities. We are broadly distributed, and we have similar issues across the entire country that my fellow panelists have discussed about the need to bring people in. An interesting statistic is the hotel business in the United States, hotels, are at an all-time high in terms of the number of people traveling and staying in hotels. It's absolutely stunning, even to some of us within the industry. It's like, did we do something good here, or what's going on? But it's a demographic shift, and the fact that people have become very engaged in travel, and it's a wonderful period of time for us. We actually have, across the country, about 5,000 hotels in various stages of planning and development, which include, we need cars to get there, we need people to build them, this is a massive period of change, and it runs into the same demographics that you were mentioning, where there's a good number of people that are at the retirement zone and coming into the retirement zone in our workforce. So one thing you can count on from our industry is a deeper engagement across the country.
Rob?
When you're the last one at the end of a very long line and it gets down to you, you're not quite sure what to add sometimes, but you're terrified to not speak because it may never get back to you again. I would say that really you're talking about alignment, Nicole, and that's one of the things that has frustrated me. I think industry tends to do what it's doing in its own way, and candidly, sometimes it feels like workforce boards, although they're trying very hard to align, are kind of in their own space, and educators are doing the same thing, and too often we're not truly aligned, and we're increasingly involved on the ground in efforts to try to address that and to try and figure out better ways to determine where can a workforce board add the most value, where can a community college add the most value, what are employers uniquely positioned to do, and to really kind of have more of a shared responsibility, a shared accountability model towards this, where we're better aligned in terms of our objectives and our outcomes. Because if we can be aligned, and if we can be talking a common language and working towards a shared goal, there's nothing that we can't accomplish together. And to me, that really seems to be the biggest problem we face, and as well as the biggest opportunity that we have, is to increase our alignment to address our common concerns.
That's perfect. Thank you, Rob. I know we've touched on credentialing and apprenticeships quite a bit. There were a couple of you that weren't able to address that, and so definitely want to come back to that specific point. But in the context of this future of work, we know that there's going to be displacement. We understand that, with the increase in automation and artificial intelligence, particular industries may be hit more than others. And I love that Todd really commented on the role of the employer as a continuous and lifelong trainer, but I do think that some employers may refute that and actually put it on the educational institutions to really ensure that individuals are lifelong learners. I'd love to start with Rob to comment.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
He's a powerful influence.
So excited. I got a really long answer. 15 minutes. Sit back, get some popcorn.
To comment on the intersectionality of the future of work, displacement, automation, and the need to create lifelong learning within these respective industries.
Yeah, that's great. And so if you look at the McKinsey report, it talks about things are going to change, and how automation is going to change things, and that your ability to improvise and change as an employee ends up being really, really important. And so we did something a couple of years ago where we went out and we went to 1,000 individuals who are 35 years or older in the world of work and been successful, and we read to them 23 attributes, and we said, what of these have been most critical to your success? And there was a list of 12 attributes that I won't surprise you, but they are things like dependability, teamwork, adaptability, willingness to learn, ability to learn, integrity, credibility, professionalism, ethics, motivation, initiative, and problem solving. And those were people from all industries, from all walks of life, who had had some success, who said those were the things that were most critical to their career success. What they didn't name was a specific technical skill. What they didn't name was any one function. It was the ability to have all of these other skill sets in their repertoire, so that as the economy changed and as progress was made, they had the ability to adapt and change. And we feel like that was really important. Now, we went on and we then did a separate survey of 1,000 people who had worked in the restaurant industry at some point in time, and we said, how many of these things do you feel like you were prepared for and you learned via working in the restaurant industry? And the correlation was unbelievable, 75% or higher on every single one of them. And I would bet you it's not any different for retail or lodging or anything else. So how are we equipping our folks with the core skills that they need? And then once they have them and they're in the world of work, how are we putting them in industries that have a pathway? I'm fortunate enough to sit on the President's Apprenticeship Task Force, as are a couple of other of the groups represented here. And we're working very hard for how do we build competency-based models that take people from those original jobs move them along a structured career path, earning badges and credentials as they go, and moving to management, supervisory, or more complex ranks. We're honored to be partnered with the Lodging Association in our effort, where we're both moving folks from level work to management. And so I think industries have to do two things. We have to be making sure that folks have the general skills they need for success no matter where they may go. Yeah. And we have to make sure that we are making the investments and making the commitment to advance the people that we do have within our own workforce with the incremental skills and learning and knowledge that they need in order to be successful.
That's great.
Wow, it's good to go first.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well,
we're going to come back to you again.
Just to follow on and amplify one point that I think is really helpful to think about is the concept of an apprentice doesn't need to be, in our view, a new team member. It might be somebody that has worked for you for a number of years, and they have now, in that, become, a dependable team member. They've demonstrated some of those skills, and now they're ready to take another step. And that, I think, is a role that the workforce boards can help us with as well, is situations where we may already have somebody on our team, but it's that next step of their development along the career trajectory that an apprenticeship program can really assist us on. We are proud to be partnered with the National Restaurant Association, but are very focused on the role that apprenticeships can play in bringing our workforce forward.
That's great. Todd, I know you gave us a bit about the Chance Act, but if there's anything else you wanted to chime in on here, please do so.
Yeah, so the apprenticeship model, I'm not quite sure why we're grasping around so much for this in the US when there are amazing models all over the rest of the world. There's a model in the UK that they've gone wholesale to, which is completely changing their whole vocational education system, their college education system, not necessarily, and the universities are being threatened by this, but the idea that you would come and you would work for 3 months, then you would go away and you would train for 3 months, then you come back for 3 months of more work, and you train, and you go back and forth over the course of 1.5 to 2 years, and at the end of that time, the employer will typically take that person on into a full-time capacity, and the government helps make that happen through the process. In fact, you can earn, the government is providing up to 28,000 pounds over a 2-year period for someone who wants to get like a level 4 or 5 degree apprenticeship model in that. And so the tech sector is part of that in the UK, but they're looking at it across all of their areas. I would say that there's virtually, if you looked at the entry-level jobs that are out there, almost none of them require a college degree when you really look at it. 92% of employers will list jobs requiring a college degree. When you really dig down, in the work that we've done in the tech sector, about less than half of those jobs actually require a college degree. So this idea that college is your only pathway to get into some of these jobs because of the absence of apprenticeships. So where apprenticeships exist successfully in other countries, particularly in Germany, which has been really successful with that, some countries in Asia and other countries in Europe, that case doesn't exist. They haven't seen this massive shift to college that we've seen in the US, where that's your biggest barrier to entry right now. And I joke to say that kids are paying $150,000 to prove to an employer they can socialize effectively. Because most employers don't even care what your degree is in. They just, do you have a degree? You can apply. Right. I mean, that's really what it's become. You go through all this time, you get this degree, but it really doesn't even matter. And after you get your first job, nobody cares at all where you went to school and what your degree is in. So you're doing all this work for this little thing just to get over this one little hump. And we have to provide more alternative pathways for kids in particular. And if you're in high school today, if you're in high school today and you tell your college counselor that maybe you don't want to go to college, they'll just tell you, just please stay over there and graduate. Like, don't bother me anymore. You don't want to go to college. You're going to screw up our rankings. And then those kids don't get any help anymore. But there's so many things we could be doing for those kids to tell them about all the different alternative pathways they potentially have. And the more we put those in place, the more employers will begin to accept them. And they'll begin to post jobs that don't necessarily have these stiff requirements to have this college degree, or they'll go back to allowing the associate's degree to be something which is an important thing. I'm an associate's degree. I worked at Arby's for 2 years. That's where I got my training there, but then went to community college and then later went on to university. But the pathways that we need for these, we're not going to fill these jobs without these alternative pathways. We're not going to have the pipelines. So we need to put those in place, and apprenticeships are a big part of that.
Thank you. Bill?
Had great comments. And you know, having worked for a German company, I saw the success of an apprenticeship program. Certainly on the automotive technical side, we would be in full support of an apprenticeship type program. But I also think that there's a blend between an apprenticeship program and a mentoring program. And I think the mentoring program comes from within, and that's something that we're concentrating on at the Auto Care Association, is that we find that our members are on the later stages of their career. They want to give back. And I do find that people do like to pass on their inherent knowledge of their industry, of their trade, of their particular work skill. And I think that that's something that we also have to develop within our own communities, as a system of mentoring and establishing a relationship between those that are ready to retire and those that are are entering the workforce or entering our industry. We also are working quite hard at the college level to educate those students that are about to graduate the viability of our industry in terms of the jobs that we have to offer, whether it be marketing, sales. I went through it before, but I do think that there's a balance between the apprenticeship program and a mentoring program, and we have to nurture the workforce from cradle to grave, quite honestly. And I think that that's a good balance between apprenticeship and mentorship programs.
Thank you, Bill.
I think you guys did a great job talking about apprenticeships, so I'd like to address a different part of your question, Nicole, which was on automation. As an industry that there's been a lot of talk about certainly the way that digital and disruption have impacted the retail industry lately. I think it's worth just talking about automation and the future of especially the entry-level workforce, which is an important topic. And we are struggling with this right now to understand the future, quite frankly. What does automation look like? What I can tell you is that I'm not sure that automation will eliminate jobs. It might. I know that right now it's changing jobs. And certainly the digital disruption in retail is changing jobs. So a cashier today is going to need very different skills than they needed even 10 years ago. When someone comes in and says, here's my mobile app, this is a coupon that I need, or I saw this online for X price, or I've already researched this TV from a half a dozen different websites. I know exactly what I want. I just need you to sell it to me quickly. Or I want to buy this online and pick it up in the store, so I don't need sales support. I just need somebody to help me get it to my car. So if you think about the way that e-commerce and digital is impacting the store experience, what it means is that it is also impacting the types of competencies that are needed to do the jobs in retail at the frontline level really, really well. And that's important because I think there's this premonition that, oh, well, once a cashier, always a cashier. And I would imagine that those of you who ever were a cashier, if you went back to a retail store today, would find that it's a very different environment. So one of the challenges is, how do we as an industry help prepare existing workers and future workers to make sure that they have those skills that are necessary to be successful. The other element that I would add in this whole dialogue about is automation taking jobs. We've got great data that looks at grocery stores, and grocery stores have been among the first to embrace self-checkout. We have some great data that looks at the average staff, the average employee count at a grocery store before and after self-checkout. It stayed the same. And what's interesting about that, I think most people would say, oh, self-checkout is eliminating jobs in the store. What actually is happening is that self-checkout and technology are allowing retailers and many other companies to allocate their staff time in a way that's much more efficient and in a way that creates a better customer experience. So instead of having multiple lines, now you might have more people grabbing carts or stocking shelves or something else. But I think that's an important point to mention as we talk about automation in the future. And apprenticeships, because jobs now are changing, even if the jobs are staying the same from a title standpoint. And that's why the work that you guys do and bringing up the next generation is really important.
Thank you, Alan. Michael?
I look at apprenticeship training as really as lifelong learning.
Yeah.
The great employers that we have in our association, in our industry, are really looking at, instead of career ladders, career lattices. I mentioned the competency-based training of stackable credentials. Every human being is unique. Every human being has unique desires. I've got so many stories of individuals that started out turning a wrench, now they're vice presidents of workforce development for some of their companies. People that started out in the field now work in the office, working with college kids, helping them learn the craft while they're learning the virtual design and construction and building information modeling. And I think this whole concept of mentoring, competency-based, earn while you learn, creates this environment for people to achieve their career dreams based upon their desire. There has to be desire on the part of the employee and the employer, and then magic can happen. Those employers that are creating that, the conditions for that magic to happen, are the ones that are creating value for their shareholders and doing an unbelievable job.
That's right. So we've talked about lifelong learning, we've talked about career pathways, we've talked about apprenticeships and credentialing. We haven't really delved into data and the ways in which technology can absolutely provide measurements and metrics of success for understanding how you're effectively connecting an individual to the right job, not only today, but the job of tomorrow. I know we're running out of time, but I'd love for each of you to provide 1 or 2 lines, either on an individual within your industry or association who you've mentored or watched really upskill and develop over time, and the power of technology long-term in really transforming the lives for everyone who we're speaking about today. And I am going to start with Rob again and just come back down the line.
I'll be brief. One of the many programs that the Educational Foundation has is something we call Restaurant Ready, where we work with opportunity youth around this nation. And I had an opportunity to meet a young man named Daryl down in the 9th Ward of New Orleans a couple of years ago, who was effectively living off the streets. And through some of the workforce development programming we put him through, Daryl ultimately landed a job at a high-end steakhouse in the New Orleans area, and is now making $60,000 a year and providing for himself and for his family. I simply wanted to say that the work that you all do is so important. The work that you do to take the Daryls of this world and give them a path to employment is hugely significant. And I'm sure the stage is filled with countless other stories of people who, because of the world of workforce boards and industry working together, have changed lives. And I'm just deeply appreciative for that. I'll let the data geeks down the way talk more about data. But from a human element, you do incredibly important work, and you make an impact in your communities every day, and I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Staying with that thematically for a moment, one of the things as an employer that you take the most pride in is when you see people coming up and making a career, advancing, taking care of their family in a better way, et cetera. It's one of the wonderful things about being an employer is that you have that firsthand sense. You must also get that sense when you see a great placement or somebody that you've worked with now advancing and becoming very impactful in their own life. Within our own company, I've got replete stories of folks that came in at one level and then advanced to much more senior levels. One that I love to tell is a young lady named Heather Hull. Heather came in as a front desk clerk. She had no proclivity for the hotel business. She was just doing it during college. She's now a general manager of one of our finest hotels and is a top performing leader in our company. And our industry, much like the restaurants and all, are just full of wonderful stories like that. And you play just a huge role in helping make that connection for us.
Thank you. Thanks.
I mean, the data is going to be what it is. It's a pipeline issue. It's a numbers game in the end. You have to get enough people into the doorstep to be able to take that step through the door, and whether that's over the confidence cap that I talked about otherwise. But it's the stories that stick with you. Mm-hmm. So our program up in Minneapolis, we use the workforce board there to recruit people for our IT Ready program. And one of the students who came through that was going home in a pretty rough neighborhood and was shot. A bullet went through his calf. He went to the hospital, they stitched him up, but he was so concerned about missing a day of class, he went to class the next day because there was a rule that if you had one unexcused absence in the class, you were kicked out of the program, and he had already had one unexcused absence. Wow. That was the kind of drive and determination that takes people from here to there. And if we can find more of those types of people willing to go to every length possible to make his career happen, which he did, and he's doing tremendously well. He's been promoted 2 or 3 times since then we can find some more of this secret sauce that we can share those stories with other people, because people need to be inspired to do these things. Lifelong learning is easy to say,
right?
But we tried to take a program to the carrier employees, because there were 1,500 open jobs in the Indianapolis area, and to a person they said, no, we're fine, we want our old jobs back. And we were going to put them through a program and train them for these jobs in the area. So it's easy to say that, but it's hard to make people do it.
Yeah.
But you get these inspiring stories. It helps people have the courage to do that.
Thank you, Todd. Bill?
Well, speaking of data and technology, our industry has to change every single year with the advent of new makes and models of automobiles. So you talk about lifelong learning, you can't just learn one year or make of a particular, that would limit your capacity a little bit. So that is a continual lifelong learning process for our industry. And the fact that there's 270 million vehicles on the road today, you have an exponential number of parts on vehicles, and just the technology of getting the right part at the right place at the right time takes an extreme dance of logistics and ordering and forecasting. So, someone in particular, there's a new position over the last 10 years within our industry called category management. And those people are responsible for looking at part trends in certain geographical locations and vehicle failures and part failures, and pulling all that together to say, okay, this part should be here in Washington, D.C. at this location because there are X amount of failures. So that lifelong learning thing is something that we have always had because we've had to, but again, supporting the efforts of this group here in order to get the right people to fulfill that demand is certainly appreciated and greatly challenged. Thank you.
Ellen?
I'll make this one short. If you need 6 minutes of inspiration today, I encourage you to visit nrf.com/David's story. David is a person in Baltimore who had a heroin addiction for 50 years. Last year, we put him through Rise Up with a local nonprofit partner, and David became employed and is still employed at Macy's. It's an amazing story, and it's one of countless stories that you all bring to life every day. David told his story in January at our fundraising gala, and you could have literally heard somebody pick up a fork in the room. It was that amazing. So, I think that is one of millions of lives that you all touch every day, but is a great way. I can't even tell you how special it is. I encourage you to go watch.
We have staff and members that are involved in workforce boards across the country, so I know what you guys do. Thank you very, very much, because what you do is create the conditions for the workforce to author their future going forward. So that is a wonderful, wonderful blessing that you bring us all. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Well, please join me in thanking our tremendous panelists, and thank you for everything that you do for us. We look forward to more work ahead together.
Jack.
Nicole, thank you. Please, once again, join me in thanking the panel. And I hope you got a flavor of how careful we have been in trying to build these partnerships, because I think it's very clear. We're talking to industries that are concerned about credentials, about industry-recognized training, that are concerned about the people who are working in their industry and the skills they are building. So again, I encourage you, as you go home and you're looking around what businesses we work and how do we establish a priority, please look for the businesses that are a part of their national association, because we know that that matters. I want to remind you that we've got
roundtables going on today. We've got a full day of business and industry conversations. We've got the industry sessions. We have another crazy panel, crazy good panel at 4 o'clock today. We also have the award ceremony, I think for many of us in the room, a very special award tonight. And you will also be receiving a customer satisfaction survey. When you submit yours, you get into a drawing for a free forum registration, easy for me to say, for Forum 2019. So again, I want to thank Nicole. I want to thank the panel. Have a great day.